December 5, 1945, 2:10 p.m. Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station. Lieutenant Charles Taylor checks his watch as he walks toward his TBM Avenger torpedo bomber. It's a perfect flying day in South Florida. Clear skies, light winds, excellent visibility. In 90 minutes, he and his 4 student pilots will be back on the ground, another routine training mission complete. By sunset that same day, all 5 aircraft and their 14 crew members will have vanished without a trace. The rescue plane sent to find them will also disappear, taking 13 more lives with it. And the radio transmissions from those final hours will create one of the most haunting mysteries in aviation history. But here's what will shock you. The official Navy investigation files, declassified decades later, reveal a story far more complex and disturbing than the supernatural explanations you've heard. This wasn't just a case of planes disappearing into some mysterious void. This was a step-by-step breakdown of human judgment, military protocol, and navigational systems that unfolded in real time over the radio waves. Most documentaries about Flight 19 focus on the Bermuda Triangle angle, throwing around theories about alien abductions, time warps, and electromagnetic anomalies. But they miss the real story entirely, a story that's actually more chilling than any supernatural explanation. The conventional wisdom says Flight 19 simply vanished in the Bermuda Triangle, another victim of that mysterious stretch of ocean where compasses spin wildly and aircraft disappear into other dimensions. You've probably heard the dramatic version, experienced pilots suddenly becoming confused, their instruments malfunctioning, radio transmissions cutting out mid-sentence as they're swallowed by unknown forces. But I've spent months studying the declassified Navy files, the original radio transcripts, and the testimony of everyone involved in the search and rescue operations. What I discovered is far more unsettling than any paranormal theory. The real story of Flight 19 reveals systematic failures in training, communication, and decision-making that turned a minor navigational error into a catastrophic disaster. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened during those crucial hours on December 5, 1945, using the actual words spoken by the pilots as their situation deteriorated. You'll hear the real radio transmissions, understand the navigational challenges they faced, and discover why the Navy's own investigation concluded something very different from what popular culture suggests. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Flight 19 remains one of aviation's most important unsolved mysteries, not because of supernatural forces, but because it reveals how quickly experienced professionals can lose control when multiple systems fail simultaneously. Let me paint you a picture of exactly what Flight 19 was supposed to accomplish. This was a routine navigation training exercise called Navigation Problem Number 1. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers would fly east from Fort Lauderdale for 56 miles to a location called Chicken Shoals, where they would conduct practice bombing runs on a decommissioned ship. Then they would fly northeast for 67 miles, turn northwest for 73 miles, and return to base. Total flight time: approximately 2 hours. The TBM Avenger was one of the most reliable aircraft in the Navy's inventory. These weren't experimental planes or untested technology. These were proven warbirds that had served throughout World War II in the Pacific Theater. Each aircraft carried a 3-man crew: pilot, turret gunner, and radio operator. The planes were equipped with multiple radio systems, magnetic compasses, and experienced crews. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, the flight leader, had over 2,500 flight hours and was considered an experienced pilot. But here's the first critical detail that most people don't know. Taylor was not originally supposed to lead this mission. He had requested the day off and only agreed to fly when another instructor called in sick. He was unfamiliar with the specific training area and had never flown this particular route before. At 2:10 p.m., Flight 19 took off from Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station. The weather was perfect, visibility unlimited, winds light and variable. For the first hour and 20 minutes, everything proceeded normally. The flight reached Chicken Shoals, conducted their practice bombing runs, and began the second leg of their journey. Then, at 3:40 p.m., the first sign of trouble emerged. Lieutenant Robert Cox, flying a separate training mission in the area, picked up a radio transmission that would chill anyone who heard it.
Calling tower, this is an emergency. We seem to be off course. We cannot see land. Repeat, we cannot see land.
Cox immediately responded,
What is your position?
The reply from Flight 19 was even more disturbing.
We are not sure of our position. We can't be sure just where we are. We seem to be lost.
Think about that for a moment. These are experienced military pilots flying in perfect weather conditions over familiar waters near the Florida coast. How do you suddenly become completely lost when you should be able to see land from miles away? Cox tried to help.
Assume bearing due west and fly until you reach land.
But Lieutenant Taylor's response revealed something was seriously wrong with their navigational situation.
We don't know which way is west. Everything is wrong. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should.
This is where the story takes a truly mysterious turn. Taylor wasn't a rookie pilot. He had extensive experience flying over water. Yet his radio transmissions suggest complete spatial disorientation in conditions that should have made navigation straightforward. The radio transcripts from the next 2 hours reveal a gradual descent into confusion and panic. At 4 p.m., Taylor transmitted,
Both my compasses are out and I am trying to find Fort Lauderdale. I'm over land, but it's broken. I am sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down.
Here's what makes this statement so puzzling. If Taylor was over the Florida Keys, he was south of his starting point, which would mean Flight 19 had somehow flown in completely the wrong direction from the very beginning of their mission. But other evidence suggests they weren't over the Keys at all. At 4:45 p.m., the situation became even more desperate. Taylor contacted another flight instructor.
Cannot switch to emergency frequency. I must keep my planes intact. We are running low on fuel.
By now, multiple rescue aircraft had been dispatched to search for Flight 19. The Coast Guard had been alerted. Ground stations up and down the Florida coast were trying to establish radio contact and get directional bearings on the lost flight. But Taylor made a decision that sealed their fate. When ground control suggested he turn over flight leadership to one of his student pilots who might have a working compass, Taylor refused. When they offered to guide him to the nearest airfield using radio direction finding equipment, he declined to switch to the emergency frequency. At 5:15 p.m., with less than an hour of fuel remaining, Taylor transmitted,
All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together.
The last confirmed transmission from Flight 19 came at 6:04 p.m.
FT-28. This is FT-74. What is your compass reading?
There was no response. Flight 19 had vanished. But the tragedy wasn't over. A Martin PBM Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13 took off from Banana River Naval Air Station to search for the missing flight. 23 minutes after takeoff, the PBM Mariner exploded in mid-air. A merchant ship reported seeing a bright flash and oil slick at the exact time and location the rescue plane should have been. So what really happened to Flight 19? The Navy's official investigation, completed in 1946, concluded that Lieutenant Taylor became disoriented and led his flight north and east over the Atlantic Ocean instead of west toward Florida. When their fuel was exhausted, all 5 aircraft crashed into the ocean and sank in deep water where they could not be recovered. But here's where the investigation becomes truly fascinating. The Navy found that Taylor had become lost on previous training flights. He had been flying over the area for months, but had never mastered the local geography. On the day of the incident, he was flying in unfamiliar territory, using aircraft he wasn't completely comfortable with, under time pressure to complete the mission. The investigation also revealed critical failures in the search and rescue response. Multiple agencies were involved, but there was poor coordination between them. Radio communications were hampered by equipment problems and procedural confusion. Weather conditions deteriorated during the search, making it more difficult to locate the missing aircraft. Most importantly, the Navy found that the compasses on the TBM Avengers were functioning normally. Other pilots flying in the same area at the same time reported no compass problems. The magnetic anomalies that some theories blamed for the disaster simply didn't exist. So why did Lieutenant Taylor believe his compasses weren't working? The investigation suggests he became spatially disoriented, a psychological condition where pilots lose their sense of direction and spatial relationship to the ground. This can happen to even experienced pilots, especially when flying over water where visual reference points are limited. Taylor's radio transmissions support this conclusion. His descriptions of the landscape below, "Everything is wrong, even the ocean doesn't look as it should," are classic symptoms of spatial disorientation. He was seeing the same ocean, the same islands, the same coastline that he'd flown over dozens of times before, but his disoriented brain was interpreting the visual information incorrectly. The tragedy was compounded by Taylor's refusal to follow standard emergency procedures. When ground control offered to guide him home using radio direction finding equipment, he should have accepted immediately. When they suggested turning over command to another pilot with a working compass, he should have agreed. His decisions to maintain radio silence on the emergency frequency and refuse outside assistance turned a manageable navigational error into a fatal disaster. But here's what makes this case so enduringly mysterious. Despite multiple extensive search operations, including modern deep-sea exploration efforts, no trace of Flight 19 has ever been found. 5 large aircraft and 14 crew members disappeared completely, leaving no debris field, no oil slick, no wreckage of any kind. The ocean off the Florida coast has been searched repeatedly using the most advanced sonar and underwater exploration technology available. Several aircraft wrecks have been discovered during these searches, but none have been positively identified as belonging to Flight 19. The planes seem to have vanished as completely as if they never existed. This absence of physical evidence is what keeps the mystery alive. Without wreckage to examine, without bodies to recover, without any concrete proof of what happened during those final minutes, the disappearance of Flight 19 remains open to speculation and alternative theories. Some researchers have suggested that Taylor led his flight much further out to sea than the Navy believed possible. If the aircraft crashed in very deep water, hundreds of miles from shore, they might never be found. Others point to the possibility that the planes broke up completely on impact, scattering small pieces of debris over a vast area of ocean floor. The loss of the rescue plane adds another layer to the mystery. PBM mariners were known to have problems with fuel vapor accumulation, which could cause catastrophic explosions. But the timing, just as the plane reached the search area, has led to speculation about whether its destruction was somehow connected to whatever happened to Flight 19. What makes Flight 19 so significant in aviation history isn't just the disappearance itself, but what it revealed about the vulnerabilities in military aviation training and operations. The incident led to major changes in navigation procedures, radio protocols, and search and rescue operations. It demonstrated that even experienced pilots flying reliable aircraft in good weather could quickly find themselves in life-threatening situations. The case also highlighted the importance of crew resource management, the idea that aviation safety depends on effective communication and decision-making by the entire crew, not just the commanding pilot. Taylor's refusal to accept help from ground control or delegate authority to other crew members became a textbook example of how poor leadership can turn a minor emergency into a major disaster. From a historical perspective, Flight 19 marked the end of an era in military aviation. These pilots were World War II veterans, trained in combat operations where individual initiative and radio silence were often essential for survival. But peacetime navigation required different skills: the ability to use ground support systems, follow standardized procedures, and admit when you need help. The technology available in 1945 was actually quite sophisticated for its time. Radio direction-finding equipment could have guided Flight 19 home if Taylor had been willing to use it. Multiple ground stations were tracking the flight and offering assistance. The disaster wasn't caused by technological limitations, but by human factors: pride, confusion, poor judgment, and communication failures. This is perhaps the most sobering aspect of the Flight 19 mystery. It wasn't supernatural forces or unexplained phenomena that claimed those 14 lives. It was a series of very human mistakes and miscommunications that spiraled out of control over the course of a few hours. The radio transcripts from December 5, 1945, preserve the voices of men who knew they were in trouble but couldn't find their way home. Their words capture the mounting panic, the growing realization that their situation was becoming desperate, and ultimately their acceptance that they might not survive. Lieutenant Taylor's final decision to keep his flight together, to go down as a unit rather than scatter and try to save individual aircraft, reflects the military values of loyalty and unit cohesion that defined that generation. Whether it was the right tactical decision is debatable, but it was consistent with the code that these men had lived by throughout the war. The families of the Flight 19 crew members waited for years for news of their loved ones. Some held out hope that the men had crashed on a remote island and were somehow still alive. Others accepted that they were gone but wanted closure. They wanted to know where and how their sons, fathers, and brothers had died. That closure never came. The mystery of Flight 19 became part of American folklore, inspiring books, movies, and television shows. But for the families involved, it remained a very real tragedy. 14 men who went to work one morning and never came home. The case files remain open at the Naval Historical Center. Every few years, someone claims to have found wreckage from Flight 19, but so far, none of these discoveries have been authenticated. The ocean keeps its secrets, and those 5 aircraft remain lost somewhere beneath the waves. What can we learn from Flight 19 today? The incident reminds us that even experienced professionals operating proven equipment can find themselves in situations that quickly spiral beyond their control. It demonstrates the importance of following established procedures, accepting help when it's offered, and maintaining effective communication during emergencies. Most importantly, Flight 19 teaches us that mysteries don't always require supernatural explanations. Sometimes the truth is more complex and more troubling than any paranormal theory. Human error, system failures, and bad luck can combine in ways that create seemingly impossible situations. The next time you hear someone talking about the Bermuda Triangle and the mysterious forces that supposedly claimed Flight 19, remember the real story. Remember Lieutenant Charles Taylor, struggling with spatial disorientation over unfamiliar waters. Remember the ground controllers trying desperately to guide him home. Remember the 13 men who died trying to rescue them. Their story isn't diminished by the absence of supernatural elements. If anything, it's made more poignant by its very human dimensions. The tragedy of good men making understandable mistakes in stressful situations, and the cruel fact that sometimes those mistakes have consequences far beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Flight 19 remains one of aviation's greatest mysteries not because of where it happened, but because of what it tells us about the fragility of human judgment and the unforgiving nature of the sea. Somewhere out there, beneath hundreds of feet of water, 5 aircraft and 14 crew members are waiting to tell their final story. Until they're found, we can only piece together what happened from radio transcripts, investigation reports, and the memories of those who tried to bring them home. It's a mystery that continues to haunt anyone who studies it, not because of supernatural forces, but because it reminds us how quickly things can go wrong, even on a perfect flying day. What do you think really happened to Flight 19? Do you believe Lieutenant Taylor became disoriented and led his flight out over the deep Atlantic? Or do you think there's more to the story that we still don't understand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is one mystery that continues to generate new theories and insights even after nearly 80 years.